This is a story written in real time based on the randomly generated word foremost. Foremost. That is a random word. Alright. Foremost. In the beginning, there was Jim. But before Jim, there was the foremost. And the foremost Jim was John. This isn't shaping up to be confusing at all. Now, John was a man of simple pleasures. He liked to skip a stone down a stream. He liked to read a book on the edges of that stream. Mostly stream based things are what John enjoyed doing, but occasionally he would wonder what's beyond this stream, where me and my family make our home. I came from a village far to the west and wanted to strike out on my own, and so I came east, and here I am at this river, and we've made quite a nice life for ourselves. But what goes beyond this stream that I throw my sticks and stones into, and which I use to till my crops and teach my children about fish and it's all stream based. He's just a man of the stream. That was John. Stream Boy John. And well, as it always will, curiosity ultimately got the best of John, and he said, I need to set off. Set off down the stream. And he spoke to his loving wife Meredith. And so Meredith said, John, if you're going to want to go on that stream, I must tell you, I've always been curious what was down that stream myself. And so, together, they chopped down some trees and built a nice raft, quite a sizable raft, and he loaded up a bunch of dried fruits and vegetables and some spears to fish while they're on it, and him and Meredith loaded up their 8 children as well. And so all of them climbed aboard this raft and pushed off, waving goodbye to their humble home. And I have a thing that automatically starts following me if I go like this. I don't want it to follow me though, because I don't want you to see that dumb empty corner of my room. And so I'm going to go back to there and lock the image in place again. Alright, so they waved goodbye to their humble home, their thatched roof and old weathered timbers. And the youngest girl took a bow and arrow and set an arrow on fire and sent it onto the thatched roof, and it caught flame and began to burn. And they said, What are you doing, youngest daughter Denise? These are old-timey people, but very modern names. They were really forward-thinking. Like, what are you doing, Denise? And she's like, well, we don't need it anymore. So, well, yeah, you don't have to burn it down. And Denise said, don't we? What if bears come? And John said, I don't see how that's relevant. And Denise says, oh, trust me, it's relevant. And so they watched the smoke pour up as they set off down the stream. And well, they soon realized that it was quite helpful to see that smoke, because midday hadn't passed and that smoke looked quite far off behind them. And, well, they reached a very wide sort of berth that the raft was having trouble getting past. They needed to start oaring. It just would sort of drift and wasn't going down the stream any further. And well, they didn't know how to continue on their path. And well, that's where the second youngest came to play. And he said, what if we take the blanket that mother sewed and wove, and we use that to carry on our way. And so all 8 children got on each other's shoulders and held the blanket out so that it caught the wind and it carried them on, and there they went. And soon they they saw another smokestack ahead of them. And they're like, oh God, I hope someone's house isn't on fire in that direction too. Otherwise we're in for some trouble. But no, it was the fire of a warm dinner. And well, they got out of their little raft, and there was a man stepped out of that house, and he said, hello there, I'm Jim of the South. And John said, why do you have your name in relation to where I came from? And Jim said, well, everyone comes that way. It's the way of the stream. When you're downstream and close to the ocean, all comes past you. And John said, you have quite a sense of self-importance, don't you, Jim? And Jim said, yes, I do. Now what brings you to Jim of the South's land? And John said, well, we got to wondering what was beyond our own little patch of stream up north. And Jim said, well, there's plenty down here. There's the ocean, there's the fields, there's the mountains. What do you envision for your future, you and your beautiful giant family? And John said, well, I envision a quieter place where there's not a super loud stream. My life just became solely based on stream stuff, and I can't get the stream out of my mind. I got the stream in my blood, and I want a quieter sort of existence. And Jim said, well, then I think the mountains is where you should go. So they hopped off the raft, they disassembled it, and they built a carriage out of it, like a little cart that they could use to go off into the mountains. And Jim said, well, if you give me that blanket, I'll give you one of my oxen. I have so many that one of them is equivalent to how much I value that blanket. I really hate making blankets, and so I'd rather part an ox with an oxen than have to make one myself. And Meredith said, well, I think that feels like an uneven trade, but Jim's like, no, I hate making blankets. Please just take the oxen. I have so many oxen. Please I would love that blanket. And so Meredith was like, all right, if you're happy with the trade. And so they traded, and soon they were off. And as they waved goodbye to Jim in the back, but behind them, Denise once again set an arrow alight and shot it up into the air, and it landed on Jim's roof and started fire. And Jim immediately just panicked and freaked out. He's like, what are you doing? And he thankfully was right next to the river, so he took a bucket and poured it out, and it was the fire went out quickly. And Denise laughed and laughed the whole way along. And so they kept on up the trail, going up the mountains and up the mountains and up the mountains. And soon they came to another little cottage. This one even smaller than Jim's. And a small woman stepped out from the cottage and said, what brings you this way? And John stepped forward and said, we look to find our new home, away from the stream and away from the fields. We're sick of streams and we're sick of fields. We just want nice, clean air. And the old woman in the cottage, she was in sort of the forest. It wasn't quite up to in the mountains yet, like not in the high mountains. She was just in a sort of a plateau. That was a very heavily forested area. And she said, well, you're in the right direction if you want air, but I wouldn't go any further than this. And they said, why? And she said, well, any farther up, and that's where the birds make their domain. And this frightened Denise most of all, for some reason. She's an agent of chaos, but she feared birds very much. And she said, we can't go. We can't go up north to the mountains. And John said, but you loved the idea of the mountains before. And Denise said, that's before I knew there were birds. And the little old woman said, fear not, for I will teach you how to fight the birds. And she taught Denise how to become an even more adept bow and arrow shooter. Is that what they're called? It must be. What else would they call it? Yeah, bow and arrow shooter. Archer, obviously. And she taught Denise how to be an even better archer. And she also taught the rest of them how to become super awesome swordsmen and stuff. Because why not? Let's just say this old woman was a war hero from the wars of old, the ancient wars of the land that laid waste, and that's why it's so sparsely populated with just random people living in solitary cabins all across the place. And so now that they all had extremely strengthened skills of fighting and archery and swordsmanship, they wanted to carry on, but the woman said, no, not yet. And they said, why? She said, because you must tear down the wall of the mountain to be able to pass through. And they said, what do you mean? And, well, she took them to the mountain pass, and there was just a giant, clear, sheer wall. And they said, well, how do you expect us to get up this? And she said, I don't. You have to figure that out if you want to go up into the mountains. And, well, this began the great siege of the wall of the mount. And they took their swords and fashioned them into picks, and Meredith began weaving lots of ropes and things, and as a family, they one by one began to gradually help each other climb up the mountain and hack into the wall, and it was a long and arduous process, and the woman watched as they went and thought to herself, I've wanted to go up this mountain so many times, but I'm far too old, and I was injured in the war. She's saying this. No one's really listening, because they're, like, really far up. They're like, leaning back, like, what's that, old lady? She's like, oh, nothing. I'm just reminiscing about the war and why I can't climb the wall. I said, okay, we're going to continue. We're going to keep going up. She's like, great. Looking good. Looking good from here. And, well, it was hard going, and the wind swept madly around them. But it was Denise who was the first one to crest the wall. And she reached the height of it and looked out beyond, and it was just wind-swept wasteland, really. There was sort of grasses and rocks as far as she could see, and then she saw a little mountain goat. She saw another. They hopped along, and then she saw a bird fly, and initially she was struck with fear, but it looked quite majestic, soaring around the mount. And she saw the goat look up at the hawk, and they did not seem to fear one another, and this looked like a peaceful place where she would be happy to make her home. But she was keeping an eye on those birds. She still wasn't fully on board with the birds thing. And so she stuck the pin into the cable into the top of the wall and got the rest of them up. And I hopped over to the other side, and they waved down to the kindly old woman, and they began their ascent up the final level, the final crest, the final slope of the mountain. And then they were confronted by golems and ghouls that came out of the mountain. The rocks assembled themselves into great beasts and said, "What brings you here?" And John said, "We came for a new land we'd never seen before. We're sick of the stream and the forest and the plains. We want a novel place, a place unseen by mortal eyes." And the ghoul said, "Well, that is certainly this place. But to get here, to prove yourself worthy of staying here, you must fight me." And well, the family took their formation, and they did great battle with the ghoul of the mountain, and struck his giant rock arms, and it was a crazy array of acrobatics, and the family jumping all around, and Denise jumped onto John's shoulders, and then he launched her over, and she struck down at the ghoul's head. I don't know why I'm calling this rock monster a ghoul, but it seems appropriate. And it was a feat like none had ever seen, and the goats and the birds gathered round to watch the display. And then Denise wound up, and she leapt into the arms of her oldest brother, who heretofore will be important but has gone unmentioned thus far. His name was Billy, and he was the strongest of them all, and he shot-putted Denise straight at the gap between the head rock and the body rocks, and she lunged her sword straight through, lopping the head clean off, and the rock creature crumbled into a whole bunch of rocks. They said, "Ah, we've done it." And the rock creature reassembled itself and was like, "Good job." And they're like, "Oh my god, you're alive." And he's like, "Well, of course I'm alive. I'm just an assemblage of rocks. You can't really kill me like a spirit. You just stabbed a space in my neck. You defeated that form of me. You didn't kill me, but I wasn't gonna actually let you guys kill me. I'd much rather you just live here than do that. I just wanted to make sure you were cool first and could fight and protect us, And they said, "Well, thankfully we've proven ourselves, and now we can make our home amongst the rocks." And they built their home out of all the rocks, and they had little brushes and bushes and berries and nice things to eat. And the little goats hopped by, and the birds came down, and ultimately Denise became a bird master, and they were her greatest friend. And after a while, John heard the wind sweeping by his new rock house, and he thought to himself, it sounds a lot like a stream. Howling wind sounds a lot like a stream, and you know what? Didn't think about that, but guess I'm okay with it. And that night, Denise, she was very small, she came back riding one of the great hawks, and plopped her down, and she said, "Well, we finally made our home in the best place in all the land." And they said, why is it the best place? Why do you say that? Every other place was fine. We just wanted to live in the normal place. And she said, "Well, because I visited our home, and then I visited Jim's home, and then I visited the old woman's home. and they were all killed by bears. I knew the bears were coming for us. That's why I burned our home down so they wouldn't follow us. But because of Jim, he told us where they were, and they're at the gate. But they can't get across the gate because they're just dumb bears. So we are thankfully safe because the rest of the world is now completely dominated by bears. And they all rejoiced that they lived in the mountain with the cool mountain ghoul and the fun little goats and the majestic lovely hawks, and they all lived happily ever after, safe from the bears. The end. Interesting where that one ended up. But there you go. What am I gonna call that one? Very much started about John, but then became very focused on youngest daughter Denise. I'm just gonna call it A Stream to Call Home. Yeah. A Stream to Call Home. All right, like and subscribe. Gonna be doing more of these. Took a break for a while, but I'm back now. And yeah, let's get it going. All right, take care.